Welcome to the Bike Life podcast by Warmshowers Foundation, where we will be sharing knowledge, experience, tools, and stories of touring cyclists and hosts from around the world. I'm Tara Lee, the woman behind the scenes at Warmshowers Foundation, the leading platform for cyclists looking for hosts and to connect with a passionate international community. Find out more by visiting us at Warmshowers.org. Now, on to the show.
Hey everyone, this is Jerry Kopak, the host of Bike Life, coming to you from the Rocky Mountains of Breckenridge, Colorado. Today I'm going to check back in with a couple longtime cycling legends, Ken Francis and Phillip Robinson, and see what new adventures they're scheming. Gentlemen, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Jerry. Good to be back.
So you guys are on the show back in late 2024, and for those who maybe didn't get a chance to listen to that first episode, can you give me a little bit of a bio on your years of bike touring, maybe how you guys met, or some of the cool places you've been together?
Well, I think to start with, I've been bike touring since I was like 13 years old and did a couple cross-country trips in the 80s. In fact, I'm coming up on my 40-year anniversary from the first time I rolled out of my parents' driveway to ride across the United States from LA to Boston. And I had companions with me, and things didn't always work out on those trips because, you know, you've got to have a right match. And so I actually started doing just like two-week trips by myself for several years. And then with the dawn of the internet, I was in a chat room and I met somebody, Phillip Robinson, who was a bicyclist. And I was planning a trip in the Pacific Northwest near where he was. And I knew that he also biked. So I invited him on a trip. And that was in 1998. And we have been traveling together ever since.
I love that you said chat room, because that brings back some memories, because I am of that era where I remember chat rooms. Some people who are listening to this may not have any idea what you're talking about, but thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Phillip.
Oh, yeah. No, I met Ken through a chat room, like he said. And our first trip was from Spokane up to, at least for me, it was Spokane to Banff in that area. And then actually Calgary. Ken went on from Calgary back down to, I can't remember where he went. We'll just say Spokane. And, but yeah, that was my first self-supported bike trip. Before that, I was doing supported bike tours with my sister and her husband throughout Oregon. So I did that for maybe 5-6 years. And so that's a lot of fun. But self-supported has a whole different element versus having a sag wagon and a caterer at the end of the ride for dinner and all that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, ever since then, we've done a number of trips, and they really have all been just, they've all been a little different, but they've all been excellent. So I can't thank Ken enough for them. So how many miles do you think you guys have probably ridden together? I know that's kind of a trite question, kind of cliche, but do you keep track of miles or just keep track of adventures?
Both. I'd have to look up and tally everything together, but I know we've done, I think, 25 trips together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Over the years, we did the first trip in 98, and I think we took a year off, and then the next trip was an Idaho trip from Spokane down to Boise. And then it was like, okay, first of all, let me backtrack a second. The first trip we did, Philip only committed to the first half of the trip because he didn't know if I was going to be an axe murderer or not. Because remember, chat rooms early on, you didn't know who you were talking to. So he only committed to the first week of the trip, which was up to Calgary. I did from Calgary to Missoula by myself. But Philip realized at that point that I was an okay person and that he really liked doing this. Yeah. So the next trip was a week trip in 2000. And then in 2001, we rode from just north of Astoria over the bridge down to San Francisco. And that was a 2-week trip. And I think in the beginning, one of the things that we were really plotting was kind of like what parts of the country were interesting that would have a lot of nature, really good camping, kind of rugged. So our early trips were a lot more nature-based and a lot more national park-centric.
Yeah, a lot more camping, that's for sure. But yeah, my first trip, I met a friend up in Banff. And so we were to sort of poke around the Banff and Jasper area and all that kind of stuff. And it sort of worked out, sort of didn't work out. But in hindsight, I thought I really should have stuck with Ken for the rest of the trip. But here we are, 25 years later, still enjoying riding.
So you guys were intentionally looking for cycling partners then. It wasn't just like this serendipitous thing, or was it?
No, it was serendipitous. I think I always was looking for other cyclists, because one of the things that I have learned is you cannot take a non-cyclist and turn them into a cyclist. They will be miserable and they will make you miserable. So I've learned that
do you have a story for that, Ken? Did you have an experience?
I've had several experiences. The guy that talked me into going cross country with him, he, hey, let's ride to Chicago. And as he was like the third person in a week to ask me to do a really long trip. So I just kind of said, forget it. Let's just go all the way cross country if we're going to do that. And even though he was the one that talked me into the trip, it was his idea. He was miserable every single day. And he lived in Chicago. And when he got to Chicago, he stopped. And if anybody's interested in this journey, because a lot of it has to do with my growth, me dealing with other people, me trying to balance my own serenity on the bicycle when I'm dealing with other people that have problems. I have chronicalized my early trips, and I have a book too, Jerry. So my book's Great Rides Across America, Open Road Adventures and Mr. Tour. And a lot of the first trips with those people and the struggles really come into play. So with meeting Philip, it was just kind of like, hey, you're a cyclist, I'm a cyclist. I'm going to be heading out of Spokane. You live in Seattle. What do you say about doing this? And, him saying, I'm going to commit to a week. I'm thinking, okay, well, that might be safe too, because if things don't work out, I've got another week of peace. But things really, really did work out. And I never guessed that we would be doing this, 25 years or so later.
Yeah, I hadn't really expected that either, but I look back, for me, it's more about the adventure and just the experience versus the miles. Although I have to say the daily mileage anymore it keeps going down every year as my age keeps going up. But it's all good. You have to sort of, reset your goals and reset your expectations and just go with it.
So I know that from listening to the prior episode, Ken had this figment or attention or obsession with like 100-mile ride day. Is that still a thing? Do you guys care about that?
Well, Ken might, but that's I'd have to have a tailwind and all downhill. No, I could probably do a 100-mile day, but it would, I haven't done one of those in a while.
The obsession was if I've got like 96 miles in,
sure,
it's like I've got to get the extra 4 in to make it a century. And I call these rides death marches, because sometimes when we look at what we're going to do, it's like, yeah, I think we can do this in a week. A good example would be Iceland. Iceland, we thought we could do the ring road in 2 weeks. And it wasn't until we got to Iceland and saw how windy it was and the conditions were not conducive to do it in 2 weeks that we kind of had a change in the style of the way that we toured, which kind of has changed since then, that was 2015. So 10 years ago, our styles have changed a little bit since Iceland. But yeah, I keep telling myself I'm not going to do these death marches. And last June, we had a day in Canada that was, I think, 85 miles into a direct headwind. And that was one of those days where we were questioning what we were doing and looking to see if there was anywhere to stop before our intended journey, because that was a hard day. And the older you get, the harder those days get.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm right now. I'm packing. I'm leaving tomorrow, and I'm hoping not to do another death march. I've got a kayaking trip planned next weekend outside of Las Vegas. So I thought, why don't I just ride my bike to Vegas? I'm not working right now. I work for an organization, and we've been on strike for 5.5 months. So I'm not working. I have the time. Yeah. So it's like, why not just hop on my bike and ride to Vegas? But I'm going to take care of myself. I figure if I don't make it all the way there, when my friends are driving with the kayaks to go to the river, they can scoop me up along the way if I don't make it all the way there. So it's all about knowing your limits and respecting your limits, pushing yourself a little bit, but still, as we get older, we have to realize that our limits change and we have to respect that.
Well, yeah, and for me, I don't ride all year round. Living here in the Seattle area, the weather really isn't conducive. I mean, granted, there are a lot of people that do ride all year round, but I do other things in the winter, like skiing, and then kayaking is another thing that I really enjoy. So I have to catch up. I have to start like about now to sort of catch up for the summer rides that we've done, and summer and fall rides.
Well, so talking about those adventures, right? So who's the mastermind on these crazy capers that you guys come up with? Does Philip, do you seem like you might be the brains of this, or maybe like you come up because you're kind of quiet, and like Ken has all the ambition, and like I could see Philip sort of just sitting behind the scenes, just sort of plotting like, hey, Ken, I have an idea, and I can just see Ken just running with it. But is that not?
No, I would say it's almost the opposite. Ken pretty much has some definite ideas, and I do too. And once we get into something, I certainly will speak up, just to sort of help things along. So, a good example of that is Ken wanted to do a coaster in Poland, and I thought, I don't really want to go there. But, when we got to Berlin, I decided that, I'm going to make sure he gets there. And so times like that, I'll sort of help things along and get them going and make them happen.
So I want to pause there. You said a coaster in Poland. What are we talking about?
There's a theme park that Ken wanted to go to outside of Krakow called Energylandia. And Ken's a lot more into coasters. He can tell you all the stats on them and things like that. But but anyway, it's like we're in Berlin and it's like, okay, what do we do next? Well, we go to Poland. And we did. And so we packed up our bikes and got them on a train. And, 7-8 hours later, we were in Krakow. And the next day we were at a really fantastic theme park. I have to say I was rather impressed with it. So, but then we find our way back, and then we're back on the bike and doing, bike kind of things. So
that's part of the shift that we had. So I thought that I was getting to the point where I was like the end of my road and not going to be doing much touring. And I had a Warmshowers guest who stayed with me who said, Ken, you should go to Iceland. Go to Iceland. And I called Philip up and said, what do you think? Crazy idea? And Philip said, let's do it. So when we got to Iceland and realized how windy it was and we weren't going to be able to see as much as we had planned, somebody suggested that we use their bus system and do a hybrid trip. So that really is kind of where things started, where we were able to use the bike and see the things that we wanted to see, and use the bus to kind of get us through some of the places that might not have been as scenic and to help us save time. So the next year we did the Rhine River. And the second day out, it was, the trail was going through the woods and there wasn't really anything to see. There were no towns. There was no scenery. It was just trees. And I looked at the map and noticed that we were going by Europa Park, which is the biggest non-Disney theme park in Europe. So I said to Philip, I go, what would you say if we took the day off tomorrow to ride roller coasters and then just took a train through like some of the bigger cities so that we can, bypass kind of the parts that we don't want to see? And Philip said, okay, we'll do this. And we made it to Europa Park. The first roller coaster in the door is Silver Star, which is their tallest roller coaster. So Philip, who hadn't been on a roller coaster in many, many years, all of a sudden he's on this, ginormous roller coaster that's over 200 feet tall. And I think that really just kind of changed things for us, the way we traveled at that point.
Interesting. So I haven't been on a roller coaster since 1992. I remember this because I was in high school and I grew up in Michigan, and there is a theme park called Cedar
Michigan's
Point.
Adventure? Oh, Cedar Point. Okay.
Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio.
Yeah.
And I'd never been on a roller coaster either. And so all the kids from my high school would do this. They would drive down and go on the roller coasters. And I thought, cool, I want to be part of that cool kid group. So I went and did that. Let's just say it wasn't for me. So I haven't been on a roller coaster since. Philip, what about you? Are you into roller coasters? Do they treat you well?
They do, but I have to be careful because I'm on some medication that sort of affects my blood pressure. And so you really, all of a sudden, where Ken can go on the same coaster 2 and 3 times, I'm about good at 1 or 2. And then after that, it's like, oh, okay, this isn't feeling so good. But I will say, at least when you go on one the first time, they're a lot of fun. And I sort of got to like it because being a skier, you're going down. I'm not like a park skier or anything like that, but you're sort of going down, steep hills and things like that. And it's really not a lot of different. There's not a whole lot of difference. Well, obviously there is, but I can see the parallel with skiing and coasters. So I've been able to embrace them fairly well. But anyway, they're a lot of fun. They can be, but I just have to be careful.
So instead of doing plotting of trips where we used to think of national parks, and the other thing that we do is we kind of play connect the dots. So we're trying to connect different roads, and this is my version of connect the dots right here. If you can see this, these are the roads that I've done in the United States. And so one of the things that we decided we were going to do last year was let's ride our bike around Lake Erie. And what is on Lake Erie but Cedar Point? So yes, we spent 2 days at Cedar Point riding roller coasters, as with Canada's Wonderland, which is up in Toronto, and Six Flags Darien Lake, and Waldameer. So we hit all the roller coasters. So I think what we do now is I kind of look for where the roller coasters are, and Philip tends to look at where the museums are. So we really kind of both try to do what we both want to do. I love museums not as much as him, just like he loves roller coasters not as much as I do. So we're able to find a balance with that. And Philip really can plot and find those museums.
Well, a good example is I'd never been to Toronto before, and Ken wanted to do a second day at Canada's Wonderland. So I just took the train into Toronto and poked around there. And it was a lot of fun. I had a good time on my own. And then after leaving Toronto, we got to Niagara Falls, and it was a really super hot day. And Ken met up a friend who's another coaster fan, and they wanted to do, I think it was Six Flags. Ken, is that right? Yeah. And I thought, no, I think I'll just go on to Buffalo. And so I went on to Buffalo and met Ken down the road. So we know when to be flexible and how to meet up and all that kind of stuff. So it worked out just fine. So
we had a trip planned a couple of years ago where we were going from London to Amsterdam, and Philip had an accident and wasn't able to ride his bicycle, but he had planned the London part of the trip. He had all the museums, he had everything planned. So it's like, Philip, okay, even if you don't do the bike ride, you have to meet me in London because you planned that part of the trip. And that worked out really, really well.
Yeah, it did. All of a sudden, I'd never been to London before, and talk about a cool town. I had a really good time. I would have had an even better time if I could have done the ride with Ken, but no, it was. It's really an amazing town. If you've never been to London, you got to go. So, especially if you like theater, which I do. So, it's a great town for that too.
I love how you call it just casually. It's like some town called London.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's huge. Right. It's like I barely scratched the surface, but anyway, it had a good time there. But Ken also had a great time looking at what Ken did on the rest of his trip. It's like, okay, I could have gotten into that. So I have to say I've sort of embraced Europe more for cycling than I initially thought of. I thought, why would I go all the way over there to go for on a bike ride when I can do it here? But their infrastructure over there is really pretty cool. And it's not that we're not bike friendly here, but it's definitely more bike centric there. That's for sure.
It's fun being with the Warm Showers hosts in Europe as well, especially if they're hosts that either of us have hosted here in the United States. That really makes it special when, we're celebrating that reciprocity.
Yeah. So Ken and I have a friend in Amsterdam who Ken stayed with more than I have, but it's sort of like when we go back, it'll be like meeting an old friend, as you sort of pick up where you left off. So.
I was going to ask if you had cycled through Amsterdam, because you talk about cycling communities and networks, and that place is really set up.
Yeah, I know. You never have a problem getting a bike box in that town when you're ready to fly out. That's for sure. Can't say that about other towns, but that one, yeah, they've got it covered.
So has that been kind of part of your plan to maybe cycle and see some old friends, see some old hosts?
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what we're planning for September.
Okay.
Now, things in the world are kind of up in the air right now, so I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I know here I live on a really, really busy route and usually host, a couple, 2-3 dozen cyclists a year, and have not hosted anybody here in Long Beach, California since November. So I'm not sure if that's because of politics. I'm not sure if it's because the road closures up in Big Sur, or since the LA fires, Malibu was closed too. So I don't know if it's just not a desirable route. So we're kind of like being flexible, but hopefully the plan is to do Europe and to visit our friend in Amsterdam. Outside of Amsterdam, this will be my 5th time staying with her. So
Okay.
Warmshowers family, as well as a couple in Brussels who Philip met on a recent trip, and I hosted them here on Christmas Day a few years back, and they hosted me on the London trip 2 years ago. So looking forward to seeing them again if possible.
Yeah, I've actually hosted 2 families, which, and they actually had kids with them. And so they're not, based on what we're going to do, or potentially what we're going to do in the fall, we wouldn't be near them, but it would be fun to go at least say hi to them. And then there's another person that I've hosted and Ken's hosted in Bordeaux, who's really great. He's quite the cyclist, and it'd be fun to go down there maybe for a warm weather kind of thing in Spain at some point. I'd like to do that. So yeah, I have to say, Warmshowers, the connection. The one family that I hosted, I was questioning their route, and I thought, you've got to be kidding me. But they sent me a picture of them on the route down off the Columbia River near Vantage, and they were smiling, and I thought, God bless them, and good. It was really pretty cool. I really enjoyed that. That just really brought it all home. So,
what was wrong with their route, out of curiosity?
They were doing. Well, it's called the Palouse Cascades route, and from the town of Ellensburg, if you're familiar with Washington, it's on the east slope of the Cascades. It can also be very windy there, and it's also pretty desolate. There's really not many services, but one of the big things they did, at least the state of Washington, they finished what they call the Beverly Bridge, which crosses basically South Advantage over to the town of Beverly, and so they wanted to do that, and I did it on my mountain bike a little bit. I was sort of like connecting the dots of this trail, and I thought, my goodness, and they're having a little kid, 5-year-old and a 10-month-old. I thought they're pretty brave to do that,
Yeah.
and even to travel with that. I have to say, it was really pretty cool to see what they did. So. But they, like a lot of people from Europe, they're taking like 10 months off. They have this 10-month gap time. At least that's 10 months sticks in my head for most of them. So, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun hosting people, especially, people with kids and a family. So the other family, they were from France. Kids were a little older. So anyway.
So I was
That's
thinking,
all I can share about them. They don't really want to be public about it, so I'll leave it at that. So
fair enough. Something stuck in my head. You were talking about sort of like hybrid traveling. So maybe you kind of hop on a train for a minute. Maybe you throw out a thumb and you hitch a ride and you cycle the parts that you want to cycle. And maybe you skip some of the ones that have a 60-mile-an-hour headwind or just not a scenic route. So do you guys have any more hybrid plans to skip your way through Europe on your trip?
Yeah, that would be kind of what we're thinking about for September. Philip is retired. I'm not retired yet. It feels this is my pre-retirement with being on strike. Hopefully I'll be back at work in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, Europe is really big. And because I can only get maybe 2 or 3 weeks off at a time, to try to see as much as we want to see with being time limited, it's it's important to be able to, spend a time in a certain region and then maybe hop on a train, just like Philip was saying about the roller coaster in Poland. We were in Berlin and I was looking at train. I think it was like an 8-hour train ride. And did I really want to spend 2 days of the trip on the, 8-hour train ride? And, I looked at Philip and said that, and Philip looked at me and he shook his head and he says, Ken, I am getting you on that roller coaster. So love the support from him. But when we got there, it was really nice to be able to have our bikes in Krakow because we had time to be able to ride around and explore the city. And then we enjoyed Berlin so much. The original plan was to go back to Prague, or to go to Prague, but instead we wanted to spend more time in Berlin and hit maybe Prague on another trip. So we went back to Berlin and rode around there for another day. And then to make up on time, we took a train to Hanover, and then of course rode to Heide Park, which is another theme park. Met one of my friends there for the day, and then ended up biking from there to Bremen, where we stayed with an excellent Warmshowers couple there, and then hopped on a train and went to Netherlands. So, we still do like 500 to 800 miles on these trips, but we just sprinkle it with some trains in between to kind of get us where we need to be.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. One of my favorite quotes is from Ben Cohen, the founder of Ben and Jerry's Ice Cream. And he's famously reported as saying, if it's not fun, why do it? Which is something I tried to really employ in my daily life. And so back to your sort of hybrid bike touring, if we're going to cycle through dense woods without any views or cycle into a headwind, like, let's just skip it, man. Let's just go on to something that we actually enjoy. Like, we're at a certain point where we can take the time or afford to just hop a train or stick out a thumb. It makes more sense, right?
It does, but I also have another saying too, which is we don't grow when we're comfortable. And, I'm a therapist and I tell my patients that we don't grow when we're comfortable. And it's my job to make you uncomfortable. And this is why I'm going to Vegas, because there might be 25-mile-an-hour winds through the desert. That's what might be predicted. So I might not get as far as I want to go, but I'm planning on just wild camping in the middle of the desert. I do have a Warmshowers host set up a couple nights on Route 66, but I am planning on a couple nights just in the desert. And I think being off work for 5.5 months, I've gotten a little bit too comfortable, and I need to get outside my comfort zone to be a little uncomfortable to grow. So I think there's a balance between, making it fun, but anybody will tell you, if you've really done long trips, there are going to be days that are not fun and you want to give up, but you just have to have the hope that, the storm goes over, the wind changes direction, things changed, and then all of a sudden things are back being good again. So I think the balance of the two is important.
Yeah, we were on a trip from Flagstaff to ultimate El Paso, and Ken loves to go on the freeway, and I do too. You can't say no to a 10-foot shoulder. That's pretty good. Maybe it's not the most scenic, but down in the Southwest, they're full of blown tire casings with the little tire cord wires out there. So one day on that, it's like I think I had like at least 4 flats, and I have to tell you that can get pretty discouraging. But it's all part of the learning. And so when you finally get to Albuquerque, plan B is they must have a bike shop here that has tubes and tires that'll handle these kinds of conditions. And sure enough, they did. And so it's that kind of pushing yourself and sort of, figuring how to overcome something that makes really bike touring what it is sometimes, because there is going to be times, like Ken was saying, where you do have some adversity and you just have to push and get through it and push yourself.
And thanks to Philip on that trip, he had needle nose pliers with him. So what I was doing was I was stopping like every 4 or 5 miles and checking my tires and pulling the beads out before they did any damage. So I didn't have any flats since the first day. And being that I'm planning on riding on Interstate 15 this week, I'm bringing needle nose pliers with me.
Yeah. And so being in the Northwest, I have fenders, and it's a little hard to makes it a little more challenging to do what Ken can do without fenders. That's for sure. So
are you carrying actual separate needle nose pliers, or are you carrying like a Leatherman that has
a Leatherman? It's like a mini Leatherman, like a real mini.
I wasn't sure if you were carrying like an actual toolbox with like a screwdriver and needle nose pliers. And
no, that's what a cell phone's for sometimes. I'm sort of kidding and stuff like that, but I used to carry spokes, and I was thinking, why am I carrying spokes? I wouldn't even know how to put them back on the bike. So, but, and I don't, not to be glib about the whole thing, but I can do basics. My derailleur cable snapped in Iceland, and I thought, okay, I think I've got a onesie up front here.
Yeah.
So luckily, but all of a sudden your brain sort of kicks in and you just do it. So
Well,
anyway.
I think we complement each other in that too, because there was another trip where my rim liner, the spoke liner, was getting dry and it was creating flats, and Philip had electrical tape on him. So, if one of us has the knowledge and one of us has the tools or whatever, we complement each other that way. And the way it's helped us grow too.
So hearing these things, I'm curious. Was there ever a time when you thought like, wow, this is bad. How am I going to get my way out of this one? Nah.
Well, Ken has taught me how to hitchhike on cycling, and so sometimes I tell Ken, let's just take the direct approach and we'll just ask, somebody in a pickup truck, hi, for $20, can you get me 30 miles down the road? And they sort of look at you with a puzzlement, and they realize that maybe you're not the axe murderer that they might think you might be. So, and we've actually had fairly good luck with that. And then one time we were in Colorado, and I worked for FedEx, so I went up to a FedEx driver, and he was at the end of his day trying to, finishing his rounds. And so he got us 30 miles down the road. So Ken likes to say we were delivered by FedEx. So that was a ground driver at the time. So, so it's like those kinds of moments, something about bicycle and panniers, people seem to reach out to you. If you reach out to somebody, they realize that you're relatively harmless, I guess, I hate to use that term, and so we've really had a lot of kindness from a lot of different people, a lot of strange people over the time.
I had a few other experiences before meeting Philip, like getting hypothermia in Death Valley. When you think of Death Valley, you think of heat. You don't think of, it's snowing. But even with those experiences, I know in the long run, I always get where I'm going. And that's what I always remind myself. I always get where I'm going.
I love that. And so you had mentioned that Philip is retiring, and you're
I'm retired.
You are retired. Sorry.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Okay. Well, thank you. I have been I'm going on year 4 now. So
okay. And Ken, you're hoping at some point retire. I'm just curious, what motivates you guys to keep doing these crazy adventures besides coasters? Or maybe that is the motivation.
I'll let Ken go first.
Okay. I think for me, the world is so big and my life is so short. I want to see as much of it as I can. And this is my favorite way to travel. I've taken planes and rented cars. I've taken cruise ships. But the real way to really experience life, I think, is to be out there and either, human power, whether you're walking or riding a bicycle or kayaking, but the human power of actually experiencing your world around you. And there's still so many places that I want to see, so many roller coasters that I want to ride, people that I want to meet or see again. I mean, there's just so much out there. And I think that's really what drives me. And I really feel alive when I'm doing it, because that's another thing too. And the planning, the looking forward to it also is something that's very invigorating.
There's a great sense of accomplishment at the end of a ride. I certainly enjoy that. And I think the days of my trying to do like a 1 month, 2 months, or 1 year, that kind of thing, are probably behind me. But it's easy enough for me. Well, it's easy enough for me to do like a 3-week or 4-week. But beyond that, but I often think about it. But I will say I certainly enjoy the satisfaction. The start of a ride where I'm starting here, where I'm going. And, bike is just a wonderful way to travel. So it's just, can't say enough about it. We did an Olympic Peninsula trip this last summer, and it was sort of like in my backyard. So we could just leave from my house and head out. And I saw part of the Olympic Peninsula that I hadn't seen in a really long time. Some of it I'd seen, but it was just different on a bike, and you see things differently, and it's fun and challenging and rewarding.
Beautiful.
We reconnected with some of my former guests. In fact, we reconnected with my very first Warmshowers guest, the very first person that rolled through our house. We connected with him and another guest up in Victoria, and we had a couple other really great Warmshowers experiences staying with people on the route.
Yeah, one in Aberdeen, the Aberdeen Hoquiam area, which was sort of a surprise there. And I sort of realized that, 101 from Aberdeen South isn't so good, but, next time I think we'll go out to Grays Harbor, or not Grays Harbor, out to West Portage and go down that way and just see some more. And it's fun seeing just other parts. And oftentimes we'll stop at a restaurant, like a local restaurant, and we'll have people come up to us and, the question always asks, how long have you been out? Where are you going? Where'd you start? And there's just sort of there's something about panniers on a bike that seems to allow the friendliness of people to approach you and engage with. So it's just a fun experience.
Yeah, I love it. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your stories of inspiration. So how can our listeners connect with you guys and learn more about what you're up to? Ken? How can we follow around with your new your kayaking adventure or your Vegas trip?
A couple different ways. I've got a couple accounts on Instagram, either the Intimacygram, which is my kind of more my professional one. That's about mental health and kind of like learning how to live positive, keep balance in your life, have great relationships, and overcome trauma. And then Ken Francis on Tour is my other one. And then I have a YouTube channel, Ken Francis World, and another one, Intimacygram, and I think I'm on TikTok now too, Mr. Tour. So we can put a link in the comments for that.
We'll definitely
get in touch.
We will have links in our show notes for sure. What about you, Philip?
It'd be a little harder for me. I'm basically just Facebook.
Fair enough.
So I don't do really Instagram, but if people want to reach out to me, I'm a host here in Seattle, in the SeaTac area. So okay. I tend to get people who are flying in. Mostly I'm not on a route. And so for anybody, just reach out if they have a question about touring. I'm certainly happy to engage it that way. So.
Got it. Well, I hope you guys have a great adventure coming up. You are welcome back on the show anytime, and we look forward to hearing about those adventures.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
All right, guys.
Thanks, Jerry.
And I want to thank everyone out there listening to our conversation with Ken Francis and Phillip Robinson. If you enjoy our show, give us a like, a share on your social channels, or maybe just tell your friends. These stories hopefully will inspire you to set off on your own bicycle adventure and maybe make the world feel a little bit smaller, one pedal stroke at a time. My name is Jerry Kopak, and until next time, adventure on.
Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed the show as much as we enjoyed making it. Wherever you are listening, please leave us a rating and a review, as it helps us reach more cyclists and hosts around the world. Visit us at Warmshowers.org to become a part of our community, or on Instagram at Warmshowers_org. If you would like to be a guest on the show or submit a question, please make sure to email us at podcast@warmshowers.org.